We're photographing a moving subject, albeit a large and slow one, but we're not sure where the subject is going to appear above the surface until it does. We're also doing this from a moving boat using a long telephoto lens. Now, this is not the best scenario for sharp images, but sharp images are what we need. Now, what we have here in our favour is the image stabilisation of the camera body and the lens. Plus, we have a full-size sensor that helps keep noise to a minimum. Now, the most vital part of this sort of project is being able to quickly lock on to a whale as it appears above the surface, obtain focus and fire. With all these variables, a fast shutter speed is essential. From the autofocus main menu, I chose animals as my subject to detect. From the Q menu, just here, I chose Zone Autofocus. The camera will track focus within that square. Remember, the sea is moving as well as the subject, so I'm trying to give the autofocus as much manual help as I possibly can by restricting the area from which it must focus. Also, from the Q menu on the back of the camera, I set the Continuous Shooting Plus setting. I set an ISO of 1000 and the lens aperture would remain wide open throughout the day. On this occasion, I also did something a little different to what I would normally do. I added a polarizing filter to the lens. I already know from practical experience that I can get up to 8 stops advantage from the in-body image stabilization and the lens stabilization combined from the Canon R5 and the 100 to 500mm lens. So I took the view that I could probably err on the safe side and really expect 6 stops of help even if I was standing up on a boat. Under those circumstances, I felt that losing 2 more stops of shutter speed because I'd used the polarizing filter was worth it. I wanted to try and remove as much glare from the water as I could and maybe see more into the water if the whales came in close to the boat. Had I not used the polarizer, I probably would have reduced the ISO to 400. I also have my Canon R5 set to back button servo focus. So keeping my thumb on that AF on button on the back of the camera focuses the lens continually within that zone autofocus square in the viewfinder. Now, given that I was using a 100 to 500mm lens with the technical difficulties of that lens, even with stabilization, a question comes to mind. Are we better to use a shorter focal length lens with a wider aperture, something like a 70 to 200 f2.8, and rely a little more on cropping the image? Or maybe stay with the 100 to 500 and perhaps have less cropping to do? It's a valid question to consider, but we are talking about unpredictable wild animals, so we can never be sure if they will be close or further away. Obvious answer is if you have both lenses, take them with you. The Canon 70 to 200 f2.8 lens is 2 stops faster than the 100 to 500. So we can still use that polarizing filter and also drop down the ISO to maybe something like 400. Now, given that we're going to get slightly better handling from the 70 to 200, which also benefits from the in-body image stabilization and also the lens stabilization, we may even be able to reduce the ISO a little more. But that's going to depend on how calm the sea is on your chosen day. Now, I chose to stay with the 100 to 500, and the upshot is I have to discard very few images due to lack of sharpness. The critical factor is, will the humpback whales put on their aerial show for us? Most of the time they do. I'll see you next time.